Hello, we want to welcome everybody to the Cincinnati School Board's what we call Finance Committee meeting, but the full term is Budget, Finance, and Growth Committee. And my name is Eve Bolton, and I'm a board member and chair of this committee. We are going to have a lot to do today, as always. I did not make another 15-item agenda. Almost as bad, but we wanted to make sure we could allot some time too for some folks to participate as well and share some of their interests and concerns as we go through this. So if I could, Rob, if you'll do the how to participate remotely, and then we'll go around and introduce ourselves, and then we'll get a fast start. Rob.
Good morning. If you'd like to participate in the meeting today, please click the hand icon on the bottom corner of your screen. We will then ask you what your school association and name is, so you can participate during the speaking of the public at the end of the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If it's the treasurer, will get us started, and we'll do around the horn.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Jennifer Wagner, the treasurer and chief financial officer. Direction you want to go in?
Go that way.
That way?
That way now.
Morning. Kimberly Hughes, assistant treasurer.
Rob.
Rob Wilson, technician.
Yes.
Contract analyst.
I'm Lauren Roberts, Chief Audit Executive.
Leslie Mooney, Chair of Fairview Clifton German Language School, LSDMC, and parent of 4 CPS students.
Abria Drummond's president of GBIS, our parent board chair on LSDMC, and parent of 3 CPS students.
My name is Lauren Campbell Kong, and I chair the Anti-Racism, Equity, Inclusion, and Diversity Committee at Fairview Clifton German School, and I have 1 child in the CPS school district.
Hi, my name is Sarah Stewart. I have 3 children who attend Society Public Schools. 2 of them go to the Fairview Clifton German. Yep.
Board member, parent of 3 alum.
That counts too. Sir?
Brandon Craig, board member.
Kevin Ashley, Director of Financial Reporting and Transparency in the Treasurer's Office.
Yay.
I'm Michelle Dillingham.
I need a plug. She needs a plug, so she's okay, don't worry. All right, well, we'll get started, and we'll start with the first part of the agenda, and to the degree that we want to discuss or talk about, we certainly posted as well the financial reports, revenue expenditures, and somewhat of a highlight regarding the CRAs. We're going to do this as quickly as we can of what you want to share with us at this time. Treasurer.
So on the original or the draft agenda, it said the financial reports were to be submitted in writing, so we don't have a PowerPoint on those.
We don't need it.
The revenues are up a bit compared to last year due to early collection of property tax advances, correct? Yeah. They never send them to us in the same month or each year, and so it's always hard to explain that. So as a result of that, our cash balance is up a little bit higher than it was last year, but it's tracking as expected. Expenditures are tracking right on target in terms of budgeting. And what else?
Preschool enrollment.
Oh, preschool enrollment's up significantly. So if you'll take a look at your written reports that were submitted, I don't have those in front of me, but.
So for January 23, it was 996 students receiving tuition assistance.
Wow.
Versus 872 last year and 589 the year before.
Yeah. So,
and then the total, I'll just give you a quick, the total enrollment at the end of the month was 2,052.
So preschool's back up to pre-COVID levels.
That is
enrolled
great.
in the district, which is a really good sign because preschool and kindergarten took the biggest enrollment hit during COVID. And so we're very excited about that, and the fact that more of our students are being able to take advantage of tuition assistance through the levy. I don't think we have any new CRA agreements to submit, do we? No. Okay. So
Well, Madam
Questions?
Treasurer, while we are doing that, we want to just update and we can have, if it's okay with Ms. Dillingham, just to report back about the meeting that you all had this past week. I think that'd be great if you can kind of come to a microphone.
There you go. I was unable to attend due to illness, so it's really a great public update.
Yeah.
Thank you for the opportunity. Again, Michelle Dillingham with the Cincinnati Federation of Teachers. And as some of you may know, we've been, I use the word fight because, you know, it feels that way sometimes for many years, to draw attention to the impact of tax exemption policy that is set by the city of Cincinnati in conjunction with the Board of Education and its impact on school budgets. And so to summarize quickly, Mayor Aftab introduced some new reforms to the residential tax abatement program that would make some changes. And as many of you should know, but we find a lot of people don't in the public, that for the residential tax exemptions or tax abatements, the school district actually does not get any pilot payments, payment in lieu of taxes. We do get 33% for commercial properties, but not residential. And in the city of Cincinnati, we exempt millions of dollars of tax revenues that normally would flow into our CPS budget, because as you know, property taxes is one of the biggest funders of public education. And so, of course, we're very concerned about any changes. We've been advocating for reforms for years. And so to that point, we were disappointed. And when I say we, I'm talking about the Cincinnati Federation of Teachers. We're disappointed in the proposed reforms. We thought it didn't go far enough. So we've been very critical of that. And we hosted, thanks to the generosity of the nice ILC auditorium, we hosted a public opportunity, and we had speakers to talk about the current lawsuit against the city that accuses the city of running discriminatory tax abatement programs, given the outcomes of these programs and how they disparately have impacted African American versus Caucasian families in our city for decades. And so we had that lawyer come, we had some experts come. And at the end of the day, what we're simply asking for is that the city of Cincinnati, number one, be a better partner to CPS. And I mean, what we've heard is that the mayor and city council and the city administration have not had any formal outreach or meetings with the district on their reforms. And two, that we have asked for an impact study on to explain to the community, to voters, and to all of us the true impact of the city's tax exemption programs on CPS, because again, in large part, we rely on property taxes. Also, we also rely on the generosity of voters to pass those school levies that we're so dependent on. And it's important that we generate trust with our community as we have to approach them quite often to ask them to vote for money for our schools on school levies. So that's the broad summary. In closing, we are encouraged by Vice Mayor Jan Michelle Kearney, who said that the administration, in fact, is going to come out with a more detailed report on what they think is the impact of their policies on our school budgets. We look forward to that. The Equity Committee, where the legislation is said to possibly be passed, is set for Tuesday, February 28th at 1 p.m. at City Hall. We are hopeful that this legislation is paused until that impact report is released by the city. And really, it would be nice if they would actually also talk to our school district as we are so affected by these things. So that's the update.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
I know that some of those conversations have now started and it being lined up about it, but we want to thank CFT and everybody that's been advocating for us and keeps watching out for us, because I think that was in part the impetus to get this ball rolling. Plus, we have an engagement and an arrangement and an agreement that needs to start to be renegotiated or negotiated, if it's true, I think, where we are in the very near future. So very active. Appreciate the update. Appreciate the work. Members have any comments regarding the CRAs or what Ms. Dillingham has said?
So thank you so much for the report. I did attend and I thought it was great. The attendance was great. I do also want to ask about and or inform, the city also does payroll abatements, payroll tax abatements. GE got a payroll tax abatement from the banks. And so while we're speaking about abatements, we also may need to include that into the conversation on how it's not just residential, but it is also other types of abatements that the city awards as well that CPS could potentially be missing out on money. Is that inclusive in the impact study?
Well, to that point, thank you for raising that. In fact, residential is only one type of tax incentive that is offered by the city. There are several. There's commercial abatements, there's TIF, tax increment finance projects, and now TIF districts. The Port Authority exempts taxes for any property built on Port Authority property. I'll give a quick example. Some of you may remember the FC soccer stadium is built on Port Authority owned land, and by state law, the Port Authority can only exempt property taxes or sales tax or various taxation. The port is allowed to exempt that for up to 1 year. And so what FC Soccer did is they drew up 30 consecutive 1-year leases to avoid paying their fair share of taxes. And so there's a lot of tools. Some might call them economic incentive tools. And we're not suggesting that no tools should be used. Of course, there's a proper place for incentivizing investment, economic development, and housing in our city. Our contention, though, is that a lot of these tools are maybe don't need to be used anymore in hot housing markets, or maybe a certain millionaire companies maybe shouldn't get those dollars that our kids should be getting in our schools. So we're asking for more, some study, some impact analysis on the various exemptions, and it happens in many ways.
Okay.
Thank you. Madam Treasurer?
Yes, I just wanted to speak to the FC Cincinnati situation. While they did discuss doing the 31-year leases, they did not do that. In fact, we negotiated and they prepaid 10 years worth of abatement in advance.
Okay.
So we could receive a $10 million payment in addition to them paying for the replacement stadium. So at the end of the 10-year, we're to recalculate and right size on the value of the stadium. So that while the Port Authority might have the authority to do that, FC Cincinnati did not take advantage of it.
Probably
Thanks for that
largely, no, but I'd
correction.
largely say that because of the pressure that was brought to bear, not necessarily by us, although we had great negotiators going into it. But again, just the advocacy by the public is just.
Well, and another
essential.
example is the Great American Skyscraper building downtown. They also were on Port Authority property for several years. So, I mean, the tool is used a lot. And if we don't have accountability and watchdog groups looking out for our kids, the market will do what the market does.
Absolutely. And we appreciate what you do. Thanks for being here today, too.
I stand corrected. My partner over there in crime said they did do a 30-year port thing with the port, but it didn't impact us. We had a separate agreement with the pilot. Thank you.
So everybody's right.
So I'm gonna say, so everybody's right in this conversation.
That's the way I like it. Okay, great.
Thank you.
Any comment?
I will make one comment. I think, again, there are a lot of things that the city's going to do with regards to how they do investments and whatnot. One of the things that we want to make sure of as a district that we're paying attention to are the things that directly impact us. So real estate is one that the taxes from real estate directly impact us, but also the property values that come as a result of some of these tax abatements results in houses that are now valued higher than where their market value was 5-10 years ago, which makes us get a different evaluation from the state as to what we are as a district, because we are determined by our wealth of home value, not by actual wealth of people. And so it's an important thing for us to think about, an important thing for us to talk about, but I think it also is important for us to find the lines where we as a district have a direct impact from the decisions to put our stake in, because one of the things you can get involved in is getting looped into these longer, bigger, broader discussions that the city will want to do from time to time about the way they operate, that it's a different interest than what we're focused on, which is making sure that our students get the best education that they can and having the funding to do that.
It's really just important that we're all rowing in the same direction, regardless how fast we row or not. Any other comments to that? Right, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great update. Number 2, do we have a district insurance update today? or not? Do it. As long as it's short. And then we'll do the investment update, which I know we have as well.
Good morning, Dan Hoying, General Counsel. I manage our property casualty insurance program for the district. We work with Assured Partners, formerly Nice Lukens, as a broker. So those policies that we have for liability insurance, auto liability insurance, property insurance, we have an international policy, we have a crime policy, are all remarketed every year. So unlike doing an RFP, we do an RFP for our brokerage service. That's Nice Lukens, but then or Assured Partners. But then they go out every year and try to get us the best insurance program, covering our risks at the best possible price. As this committee knows, our insurance costs have gone up substantially in the last 5 years. That's mostly due to market changes. We renew our property insurance in November every year, and we had only a modest increase this year in our property insurance. We review our other major policy is our liability insurance, the school board liability policy that renews in March, and that will be submitted on the board's for the board's approval at I think the March 6th meeting. And we saw a modest increase again, about 6 or 7% increase, which is high, but consistent with kind of inflation and what the insurance market is seeing. So it will be with the same companies and at the same limits. So it's the same insurance program, but at a slightly higher cost for the 23-24 year. Glad to answer any questions. We meet quarterly with our insurance team just to talk about new possible risks and where we should be looking to insure the district, what programs are out there, et cetera. So that's something that's monitored in our office, and then we report that to the treasurer and superintendent as well.
Thank you, Mr. Hoying. The members have any questions about the insurance piece?
No.
Thank you. And it still is, it's a different name, the Nice.
Nice Lukens was a
longtime
Cincinnati firm. They're now known as Partners. They're out of Kenwood.
Thank you. I've admired them for a long time. They've done well by us, I think.
I think so too. Thank you.
Thank you. Investment update?
Yes.
We making money?
We are.
Okay, good.
So this will be brief, and I just have you each have hard copies of the report. One of the things, so we put this, I think, on the work plan to do this update twice a year, and I think in the past it was done annually. So just trying to do it twice a year, and so we looked at the investment income through December, and at this point, for both the general fund and the debt service fund, we're running about 60%. So we're halfway through the year. We're running about 60% over the prior year, so at least up from last year. There has been a lot of volatility, particularly in the long-term investments with rates, and one of the things on here is just for illustrative purposes what the graphic for the 5-year Treasury bond yield has done over that period, just to kind of inform why there were some dips over the 5 years that we're looking at. So I think we're kind of as expected given the current market right now, where we are. The second page is just a summary of our bank reconciliation at the end of the year, end of the calendar year in December, just to kind of give you an idea of what the composition of our investments are. And certainly we have more detail that goes along with it, but this just kind of gives you a high-level idea. Red Tree Investment manages a big significant part of our portfolio, and they service a lot of public clients in the area, and we feel confident in their services as well. So I think that's all I have.
Great. Is there any additional comment?
No, it's just you can see the dip in revenue, interest revenue, coincidental with COVID, and everybody suffered the same dip.
Visually reminds me what that was like. Thanks. Members, good on the investment piece and
I'm good for now, but again, I've said this before, I'll say this again. I like to get information so I can kind of look at it ahead of time, and I have not. So I've just now seen this, so I'll reserve to have some questions later. I don't like to look at things and then I don't have a poker face very good, so I have questions, but I like to formulate them. So I'll just reserve the space to bring it back.
that'd be great. And
Thanks.
if need be, we can do that next month or contact, as we often do, the treasurer about dealing with that. If we'll go now to the next item, which is the work plan. I'm not planning on us having a big discussion about it. I would like it, now that it's been handed out and we've consolidated some items in it, for the public's benefit, each committee has to create a work plan and indeed propose it and get it adopted by the full board before we're really able to proceed. This is similar to others work plans that we've had. We've still do the financial transaction piece at the end. There's also a calendar referencing, and where we are now as the policy committee today just got the assignment regarding protocol and bylaws. Kind of want to put in abeyance so we do have enough time for some of our guests to speak. This still reflects some of our strategic planning from several years ago, and which concluded at the end of last year. So I would like the members, treasurer has gone through the work plan, made some modifications, and I would like to request the members to do the same and see where we need to probably add or diminish or lessen, or as Kevin mentioned, do something twice a year instead of once a year, that kind of stuff. So if we can take the time to kind of look through that, I think that would be great, unless you wanted to add something or make a comment about it now. With everything being down, oh, by the way, if the world didn't know, we were in shutdown, not because of violence in the street or anything at all, but what was the, it's a complete.
You said it like we was shut down. It was the network, y'all. It was the network. The kids was fine. It was the
hot spots. Yeah, that's why we weren't. So we will work through that. But let's look at that, and then also I think you're kind of taking the charge on the protocol bylaw efforts.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is the only thing that I would have is just for us to give it a look at whether or not what's in our description in the bylaws also matches up to what we're planning to do for the work plan, because I think sometimes stuff that's in there is stuff that we used to do that we don't have to do anymore, or stuff that we are supposed to do that's not listed in there. So
Yeah, so it's reasonable to think that this is kind of a parallel effort as we go, so different status, but appreciate the additions and the subtractions that have already been made and keep going on that. So we've, if there's no other comment about the work plan.
Ms. Bolton.
Jen.
I do. So I highlighted in yellow questions.
Great. You want to deal with those now?
Yeah, so
I like them.
The first highlight, that paragraph is not mine. I'm not sure that,
Yeah,
but on the work plan itself. So the Cincinnati Preschool Promise, they used to come monthly and they were coming quarterly. And we got off cycle because of COVID and whatnot. She was not able to come today. So I think she's going to plan to come for March's finance. But I didn't know if you want to leave it the way it is and just have her do March and skip April and then go back on cycle in August, or do you want to change the cycle when DPP comes?
Well, I would like to skip, but we also have, and the reason being, we have the agreement that has to be secured fairly soon, right? Regarding Preschool Promise and us.
Yeah.
So I don't know how that would, negotiations would fit into what would be on this calendar.
So this calendar is strictly for their monthly financial updates and anything like that. So I would recommend doing March and then May because they will be doing some things in the budget that you probably want to hear about before they
Yes.
go too far along the line. That which is outside of the agreement conversation.
Is that good?
That makes sense.
I would just add, in terms of the discussions that we've had so far, I don't think it'll largely change the stream of payments between CPS and CPP. I think the bigger part of the discussion is how CPP proposes to use funds and whether they're able to use them. I don't think it's largely going to have a big impact on, again, the stream of payments. Or
It will have a significant impact in the amount because we both have outgrown the original $15 million set aside. And we're chewing into that saved cash balance from the first couple years rapidly. And so eventually that savings account set aside is going to be gone. And so we need to make a decision about, are we going to continue to grow? We're going to go back to the public for more money? Or how are we going to fund this expansion, continued expansion growth? So there is a potential for significant financial impact.
So are you still recommending the sequence that you just suggested? Was it March and May or?
Well, yes, March and May specifically for their budget proposals or draft, whatever draft it's in. But then as we restart the master agreement, we'll come back with updates whenever that's appropriate. I don't know when that will be.
General Counsel Superintendent, by the way, Public Superintendent joined us almost right after we did all the introductions. So the engagement piece, the agreement piece, moving forward, does May look good or?
certainly, yeah. I mean, we're ready to share sort of our recommendations.
Excellent.
Right. We actually have our last closing conversation on.
Yes.
By next week, we'll be able to share our recommendations.
That'd be great. Numbers good?
Yeah, I
Treasurer
think,
good?
I think as many times, if you're talking about 3 proposals and one of them involves a potential levy, I think and as much face time to the public that we can give them about the status and where we are is appropriate. So I would have them come as much as they can so that we inform the public on what is going on our end, what is going on their end. I would defer to more rather than less.
That levy comes up for renewal on the ballot in November 2024. So we have good time to publicly engage.
So, and I think that we're talking in terms of renewal, but you kind of moved in there with, I won't say expansion, but.
Well, the levy is the levy is a $48 million levy. There was a $15 million set aside for the purpose of expanding preschool that we share, Cincinnati Public Schools shares with the Cincinnati Preschool Promise organization. We have both outgrown the $15 million annual revenue cycle. So early on in the levy, we weren't spending the $15 million. So we put that money aside, specifically targeted for preschool expansion, as we promised. Because we've outgrown the annual $15 million, we're starting to use up that savings. And I think it's in 25 is when we forecasted, given certain circumstances during the last budget cycle, when that money would dry up. Right? So we're either going to have to chew into the other general operations budget to support the growth, or find other funding sources.
What's the rate that we're using that? Like how much did we save and then we're using how much per year?
So I don't remember all the numbers off the top of my head, but $7.8 million was the first year of collections that we didn't spend because it was a half year. So remember, property taxes are on a calendar year, we operate on a fiscal year. And then for the first 2 years, CPP underspent because they were in ramp-up mode, startup mode, right? But next month we'll update that forecast with year-to-date expenses, and then we can show that. It's a spreadsheet that Kevin does, and we'll bring it back at the next finance committee.
Okay.
To be a little bit more articulate about it. But
that would be helpful for me to see it in writing. I remember having conversations where they had not used years ago where they had not used everything. I didn't realize that we were chewing into and it's a good problem to have. I'm not complaining. I'm glad that we're expanding, but I want to see the numbers. And I think that if we owe that to the public to show them those numbers early so that we can, even if a year from now we ask for a levy, we can justify that we've been engaging with them.
Yeah, and those are generally in the monthly numbers that Kevin does with us,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So, because I know we have some of it in the included documents that are on board docs with some of the monthly things, and been the long running conversation that we've had for probably not the last 9 to 10 months about since we've been renegotiating a contract as to what portion of the funds that are going to be raised beyond that get used first, so that we are not going into that over those savings dollars. We've had that conversation several times.
Right. So this year is the first year that we've gone above that $15 million. And this year's budget combined was $19.5 million.
Okay.
So
I thought we were.
And again, we've tried as a goal not to, and certainly to tell the public, rightfully so, that we prefer no new levies. I mean, a renewal is one thing, and that would be still within the 5-year forecast that I think we're trying to adhere to. There's also the philosophical piece about how much public monies are going to be used in an effort to provide for private providers. I mean, there's an issue there, and I think we've addressed the preschool deserts that we had when all of this started, the fantastic community effort that was raised, and all sorts of stuff. But also, we have to say, when we look at it, are we adhering to what the original promise was? Whether it's quality seats or two stars, 3 stars, whatever. So there's a lot to discuss. So I think it makes sense that we would be discussing it. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to remind the board and the public that the state of Ohio does not fund preschool through our state foundation formula. And so we have to be very careful about the expansion, because what we don't want to do is start taking money away from our K-12 kids to fund preschool. So it's a challenge.
And I will remind the public that this district was providing for kindergarten long before the state of Ohio even found out that there were little kindergarten kids. So we've been kind of ahead of the game the whole time.
Yeah, many districts are still doing half day instead of full day. Yeah.
At great cost.
We're trendsetters.
We are trendsetters. Okay.
So so what was the final? I'm sorry. Can we get back? What was the final? We said March and May.
Yes, and then we'll go back in August, go back on our regular cycle. But March to get caught up to where they are for this year, and then May to focus on what they're thinking in the budget.
Okay.
And then we have perhaps in May, the agreement might be solidified. Okay, cool. Well, let's go on now to item 4. You want to tell us what our happy book reading book report is here? Everyone's favorite item.
Yeah, you have all weekend to.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna get right on it.
Thanks, Kevin.
It's hot off the presses.
Yeah.
Tell us what this is.
So this is our annual comprehensive financial report. The state requires us to submit accrual financial statements for all school districts. But in addition to that, a lot of school districts, and Cincinnati being a trendsetter, does a comprehensive report, which is then submitted to the Government Finance Officers Association. And they review it for certain aspects and data points to determine if it meets their standards. And the district has received that award for 20 years plus in a row. So that's a positive thing. So if you look in here, there's actually the certificate from the prior year showing that we received it, the district received it in the year before. So the other piece of this is in the financial section, which is probably about 30 pages back, is where the independent auditor's report is included. And so the state requires a biannual audit every 2 years, but for a larger district, since we spend 750,000 or more in federal dollars, we're required to have an annual budget or an annual audit. And so this opinion is on the financial statements and on the ACFR elements as well. This has been submitted to GFOA for consideration. It is in essence a public document now. The state auditor's office, I'll go into, there's also, they issue reports on compliance, internal controls, federal compliance, federal internal controls, our federal schedule of expenditures, and all of those things are in a supplemental report that will get released once the state auditor's office has done a review of Plattenberg, who does the audit. Once they've done a review of that. The deadline for that is probably the end of March, so the public release will probably come then. We do have the auditor from Plattenberg coming to executive session on Monday, go over the results. Spoiler is there's no issues, no significant issues.
Clean audit opinion.
Yes, yes.
Congratulations.
So the other thing I just wanted to recognize too, obviously the treasurer, assistant treasurer, treasurer's staff, superintendent staff, really give a lot of information to build some of the statistical tables at the end. And so I just kind of coordinate gathering all of that and helping the firm put those together. But I do want to recognize all that support and appreciate that support.
Great. Treasurer staff, treasurer.
Good teamwork.
All right. Great, great. It's also the greatest number of people that ever come to any of these board committees. So we're always happy, always happy to see everybody. Thank everybody. We're very fortunate. Any comments?
Just briefly, two things. One, I think this is tremendous that you all provide us and that it's in a book. I know a lot of the places do not do monthly displays of it. But I think it's a lot of great information. And for folks to also recognize this is the fiscal year ending in June of 30th, 2022. So, again, that's recognizing the work that's had to be done to compile all this information since the fiscal year ended to really give a detailed set of information. The only other thing is that I didn't see Eve Bolton's picture anywhere in this. I feel like y'all missed a chance.
I agree. I want.
And for next year's book.
We can have that.
Yours. Yeah, take that. Yeah, Kevin.
I just want to say thank you. I don't think you can hear appreciation enough. So thank you so much. I know this is super, super hard work. Even to collaborate and collect the data, it's hard work. This is really, really thorough. And so I'm happy to pass this down as long as you pass me back my book so that you all can see this and see what we're. Can you pass this? But thank you to everyone for all of your hard work. I did see my name on there. I was like, oh my gosh, they got everything in it, a government name, every time that it expires and everything. So, it always makes me nervous when we're accountable for things, but you all do a great job at making us look great.
So just a comment, if anybody actually reads it, this is a modified accrual system. So we operate on a cash basis. So we recognize revenue when we receive the cash, recognize an expense when we pay the bill. This is modified, and they forced us several years ago. How many years ago did they force us to start recognizing the pension liability? So the pension, so teachers in school districts pay into the state retirement system, right? So there's a liability for when you all retire, we retire, that the state has to pay us for our retirement. So it's the state's debt, not ours, because we've already paid the state that money, right? But they make us recognize the liability in this document, which confuses everybody because it's not. So like, is the state really going to shut down and then the district has to pay that bill again? So I just wanted to lay that out there that I remember a couple of years ago, the audit committee, we spent almost an hour and a half trying to explain it to them. And so I might be conveniently absent at the next one. But I just wanted to say it's a modified accrual system, and it's a little confusing because of the pension liability. There was a new requirement this year that delayed everybody's audits, and that they had changed the rules on how you recognize operating leases. And we use a lot of operating leases to fund our technology refresh. So the 35,000 student laptops that are out there, that kind of stuff. And so those are new requirements. So every year the state auditor comes out with these new statements and requirements. And so we are always compliant.
Wait, you also, thank you to you all, but you also mentioned audit, and we have our auditor here too. So thank you to you too. I'm sure that this is a stressful time for everybody. When you start talking about money, taxpayer money, millions of dollars over, with commas, that's a lot. So
It's a lot of
thank
work,
you.
yeah.
Thank you.
Great.
The other layer on the pension information is not only do we have to include that, but it has fluctuated significantly in the last couple of years. So one year it really increased our assets, and the next year it decreased our assets. So to add just another layer to that piece of it.
Thank you. All right. I think our next item is first kind of an overview of where we are in the budget development, specifically as to how far along are we on school budgets, how far along are we on central this budgets, and then also maybe I think you're going to give us a little bit of where we might be on our contract review
Yes.
briefly, and then I think we'll use this opportunity also to have rather than waiting till the end of the whole meeting, probably have our guests kind of share their concerns and their interests. And Rob, do we have anybody at?
One speaker.
Okay. Okay, great. Well, we'll do this, and Jen and Superintendent, if you can get us up to date as to where we are on school budget development, the central office, and the contract review that you all have been engaged with.
So if you want to flip to the first slide there, please. So just to give you, just in general, we kick off the budget cycle every year, the operating budget cycle every year in October with the official October enrollment. And we use that data to start projecting the students for next year by school, by grade level, and by condition. That data is fed into a bunch of staffing formulas. Those are sent out, and we go through an iteration of corrections and appeals and additions for equity. And we've been through the base staffing allocations, the equity additions, the staffing appeals, and all the corrections and adjustments that needed to be made. We are now in the process of updating the PAM choices. So schools, depending on the number of load-bearing teachers they have, a load-bearing teacher is somebody who gives grades. Like one example of non-load-bearing teacher would be an inclusion teacher that's in the third grade classroom with the third grade teacher. Okay. So for every load-bearing teacher, for every 7 load-bearing teachers, the school gets what's called a PAM allocation, PE art and music, technology and library. And then they tell us back, so we just tell them the number of FTEs they get, full-time equivalent employees. They tell us what subject, how they want to allocate those out by subject. The ILT, the LSDMC are supposed to do that. The board several years ago put out a requirement that every school had to at least have a half-time of each PE art music, because prior to that, a school could choose to have 7 music teachers or 7 PE teachers, and but the board felt very strongly they wanted to have all students have access to each of them. So we're updating that, and so early next week, probably mid next week, we'll send out final staffing reports out to the schools. They do have their non-personnel allocations, so they are working in our budget software to allocate their non-personnel dollars, how much they want to put in classroom supplies, mileage, office supplies, field trips, those types of things. And those are due back to us on the 10th. We backed that up a little bit because we got a little bit of a late start this year. And then as soon as that's over, on the 13th, the central office budgets will be kicked off. We'll give them 4 weeks to get their budgets done and submitted. So if you'll flip to the next slide, the guidance that we're going, I'm sorry, was there a question? Oh, I think. So the guidance that we're giving to budget managers is that they need to tag their budget asks in alignment with the board goals that were adopted and the guardrails. And so we're setting up, Mike's team over here is setting up the software system so that if I put a line item and I want to use vendor XYZ to do something, I have to tie it to an initiative. So that way we can track and report out to the board and to the public how we're spending our money on those initiatives, and then we can do return on investment calculations. So it's all building towards an end. And then everything, of course, is looked at as in terms of an equity lens. And a lot of the staffing formulas that were put together this year, in addition to the base formulas that are dictated by collective bargaining agreements or state and federal law, were determined based on student needs, academically or ELL, gifted, I'm drawing a blank, sorry. So that's getting ready, that process is getting ready to kick off. And then if you hit to the next slide. So when the central office budgets come back, then the treasurer's office spends some time consolidating all those requests, putting together reports. So the executive leadership team will spend a few weeks analyzing those requests. In the 30 years I've been with this, or actually 29 budget cycles I've been with this district, the ask is always greater than the target, right? And I'll remind you, the target is based off of the 5-year forecast. And so this year's forecast, or next year's target, is lower than the budget for this year. We inflated the budget this year for 2 reasons. One is we wanted to give the new superintendent who showed up on May 2nd an opportunity to start some initiatives. And 2, the Cincinnati Preschool Promise went above and beyond their $15 million, their half of the $15 million allocation. So I had to dip in that prior cash. So that drove our budget up to $613 million. Next year's target is $574, I think. So we've gone through a period. General fund only, yes. We've gone through a period of looking at all of our vendor contracts for impact and return on investment to determine we need to make sure that every dollar we spend, we're spending it to drive the best student outcomes to the best of our ability. And I'm sorry about when I did finish this morning because the network was down. When you switch things from Google Sheets into PowerPoint, some of the spacing gets messed up. So I didn't, just saying.
We'll forgive you.
So where do we go from here in terms of the executive leadership team goes through and they determine, okay, well, we can't fund this at this amount. We got to do it this way, or we're not going to do that, or whatever the recommendation from the superintendent. It is the superintendent's recommendation to the board to adopt the budget. Although we partner very closely, we have a lot of conversations together. I'm anticipating the first draft to be at a board meeting on the 24th, given all the timeline, and then all the opportunities that we have to come in front of the board and do public engagement on specific topics. And so I was going to recommend that we identify which topics we want to talk about, so that it's not just one 4-hour presentation that it's hard to digest. We can give like a high level, this is where we are against the target, here are our challenges, and then at the other meetings we can focus on this is what we're doing with ESSER, and this is what we're doing with the title, and this is how we're handling equity, that kind of thing. And I think that's all I had in terms of the budget or where we are right now.
Thanks.
So I'll pause right there.
If I could just say something real quick, we'll go to the superintendent. This period of March and April, I know generally the budget is voted up or down in its entirety, which is where you're aiming for. That's what we try to do. But the issue is before we see what it is you've got to give us to vote up or down, the need for the board to, and the community and whoever, to help guide what we want to see in that final effort. It happens in these months that we're looking at particularly. We did the goals and the guardrails.
Right.
And we've also done a number of other things of what we, value. But really, it's really before we see that final draft or the initial draft. I want to know what April 24th is. That board meeting, is that your initial draft, or are you presenting, would you be presenting as that the final budget?
So go ahead. Go ahead. I was going to say that my intent was that's the initial. The final budget doesn't get presented to the public until June 26th.
And that's when the vote would take place.
And the board adopts the budget through an appropriations resolution. So the general fund is $575 million. So you approve at the fund level.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the process that we followed in the past is in June, we we have had a series of public engagement, public presentations as we refine the budget through typically March through June, and then the board votes. By then, most of your questions have been addressed and answered and whatever, and then we adopt the budget then so that I can start making payroll.
What, from members before we go to the soup?
So I think, Jen, you've been able to answer a little bit of my questions earlier. I shared with you, and I'll share this publicly. We look at everything from like an overview, but there are some significant things in the I won't say the weeds, but in the line items in the grass that I'm very interested in, particularly staffing on a school level. That's one area that has been very, very contentious for the community. And I don't mean like one or two. It's been extremely contentious that I'm very interested in. So I would like to see particularly school budgets. And what I'm looking for is where they were, what you're proposing, and where their final is with regard to title funding and whatever their final, whatever, wherever they're close to, because I'm kind of interested in that differentiation. And it could be from a staff level, it could be from an entire budget level, but that's kind of what I'm looking for. And I don't know if I would get that because it's really not your budget, it's your budget. So you're just managing the money, right? Is that what I'm understanding?
And the process,
And
right?
the process. So that's what I'm interested in seeing. I don't want to just see a number in totality. I'm like, how did we get here? Is what I'm looking for.
So your interest would be, if, as Jen has mentioned, individual topics or buckets that are part of the budget. You're the one that you would be looking at, or you're talking
because I'm
school budgets.
Well, the schools, like how the end goal. Let me back up again. When you present me stuff in real time, then you're gonna have to get the non-poker face. So I'm wondering, I like that we're tying things to the goals and guardrails, but there are other expenses that we're making moves on that are not necessarily tied to specific goals and guardrails. And I'm wanting to look at the picture in totality. So, hey, we've got, let me just say, 600 million. Last year, we're down to 582 million. Where did we cut that? And I'm not going to see that in just looking at a bird's eye view of an entire budget. I want to see where the cuts were made.
Yes.
And if that is in staffing, if that is in facilities, where are those things? And so I'll say it that way so you can tell me how I need to see that. But that's what I'm looking for, the differentiation between last year's budget and what's being proposed this year, and I guess an itemization of those different factors.
So a couple things. That piece, thank you, Dr. Moffitt. In terms of the allocations, because I think I hear a couple different things, so I want to make sure that we are on the same page with what it is that you're requesting. So the allocations for schools, which is where they receive their staffing from, we use a staff allocation model, and that allows us to make sure that we are not using a lump sum for Title I, but we're able to use Title I at the level that it's intended federally. The staff allocations we actually reviewed during our work session. So that's how staffing was done for the school. So what we can provide for you, I think that you're asking what was staffing last year versus what staffing is this year as one of the areas that you're looking for.
That would be
okay. And those numbers come specifically from projections. So that's where we start in terms of the projections. In terms of Title I, and Title I, as we all know, is very, very heavily monitored. In terms of Title I is done also based on the numbers of students in schools and the allocation of those students in schools. So if a school is projected to have fewer students next year than they have this year, their Title I allocation decreases. And so for where we work with schools this year is helping them understand that, because they, if they've had some changes in allocation, they've not necessarily made that connection to the projections for the students. So that would be one. That would be the second one for that. For non-personnel budget allocations, it's also based on per pupil, the number of students. So if we are, again, the projections are less this year than they were last year, or the reverse is also true. The projections are greater for next year than they are for this year. They will also see an increase in non-personnel allocations as well. So I think that was what we were asking for in terms of the budget piece, but I want to make sure that part is correct before I ask my next question.
That part is correct. There's a formula though, that the projections is one part, but isn't there also a formula that is inclusive of, we don't have like an equity formula, but isn't there also like a CFT formula? Isn't there a formula that is?
Hey, let me interject there.
Okay, maybe I'm.
No, everybody's good. It depends what formula. For example, we suggested we would like to see, or I suggested we'd like to see the CFT formula at the lowest level. And I think the treasurer shared that
Correct.
with us. And I think that was useful. If you change the formula, you get different numbers or different results.
Right.
So is that the choice you want to make versus the formula we've been using? If it looked like it was going to cost, $13 million more for K-8 staffing.
That's right.
To do that. Well, you know what? I might think that's a great idea. But that means there's $13 million we can't use someplace else. Got it. No problem. So it does depend on the formula. And there's plenty of choices.
It's a big problem, but yes.
It's not a problem. It's the same pot of money. It's the same
Yes.
pot.
It's a matter of priorities, exactly.
That totally is it. It's choices that we make and what we're trying to do. So as many choices as we can have or whatever, that would be cool.
It's a matter of priority. What's the priority?
They were talking about the how the class size ratios is what they were talking about.
So the priority is class size ratio.
Well, we don't know if that's a priority.
Oh, okay.
If we want to make that a priority, then you use a different formula than we've been using necessarily. If the other form, whatever. But let me go to Mr. Craig real quick, and then I'll come over there.
I think it's important to also just recognize, and I think this is maybe a little bit where Superintendent will talk about it in a second, but all of this goes into, we have a finite set of funds for the district.
Right.
That we at some point, everybody's going to request more than what any formula will ask for. And the reality is that we have this limited finite set of funds that we then have to go back and somebody is not going to get something they want.
Yeah.
And that's just the reality that we will be faced with. And it's the hard decisions that you all elected us to make. And it was a hard decision that the superintendent and the treasurer have to do with when we look at our budgets. And we made those same decisions, tough decisions last year. We make them the year before, keep making them, all the way back. I don't know, there's been too many years where we've had more money than we've had, more money coming in revenue than we've had expenditures.
Right.
Or at least things that people want us to spend on. But still have more money.
Right. And still
Everybody wants a million things when we have those funds. I think it is important to recognize when we're doing our budget, though, that there are some things that we have that are, we have formulas that will give us an amount, and that still has to then be addressed to match up to what our total expenditures will be for that year. So like, even if we do the formulas, even if we say these are hard line things, there are some things that we then have to figure out, okay, what are we taking from to get to there? What are we adding here to make this work? That's a part of that budget process also that will come to the board.
Mm-hmm.
That'll be part of that board discussion that we come back to and say, hey, we've used this formula, but this is what's going to result from doing that. That is not going to happen today. It'll be over the next few months to be done. And so I think that's an important part to also keep in mind, is that the priorities that we are setting and the information that we're getting is still projections. It's still things that we're having to figure out to then make the discussion about what are our priorities. So nothing's been set in stone at this point.
The more we collaborate, and the more we're, open to what the vision may be, and the more we stay true to what we've set as important, the better the end result will be. But you all know, I say it again, I think we should be passing a budget in August, not in June.
Is this presentation
But-
online? This
Yes.
Yeah. Let me go over here. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Let me go
I just
real
wanted
quick.
Some questions for defined understanding. Process that you're talking about, Mr. Frank, is that a transparent process that's open to parents, teachers, taxpayers? Is that an open, transparent?
It would be a process that, like as Jen was describing, they'll come to the board meetings with information, and there'll be plenty of opportunities for folks to give feedback, to give comments on.
Algorithm you use. Choice is transparent.
Yeah, I think the choices are transparent. I think the processes are transparent. We really do try to do most of our public
Work in the
work in
public.
public. No,
Yeah.
no. And I think you need to demand that of us.
Yeah.
Because, and I think the board has to demand that to a certain extent from the administration. The administration also has to tell the board, well, figure out what it is you want.
Right.
Because don't tell us at the end of this isn't what we wanted. So I think the more we do all of this, the better it will be. And as our superintendent often says, we'll be ready for all the lobbying that will be following.
And it always
and coming
happens.
forward. It's all part of doing the public's business. Yes.
And then that allocation model that you guys use, and that's also 5-year projections, or is that a different time frame?
Very quick. No, that's actually based on next year's projection. So it's actually done year to year. To just an additional connection to Board Member Bolton's point, when we think about those projections, we honestly don't know what will happen until bodies show up in seats in August.
Mhm.
So we start a process in October to then look at where we presume we're going to be in August. We then take as much historical information that we can about changes in schools. And so where because I've heard a little bit of the conversation, so I do want to talk for just a minute about the appeals process. So the second part of your question is in terms of public. All of the meetings that we do are public facing meetings. So if you go back to the Saturday work session that we had as a board, the presentation for how staffing is done is on that presentation. There's a PowerPoint that looks very much like this. So you can see by the school, this is how, based on the number, like our treasurer said earlier, each school gets one elective teacher, special teacher for every 7 load-bearing teachers, right? That information is there and included at the basic level. The second thing, though, that we do is go through an appeals process, because the appeals process allows us to then look at some of those nuances that are present in schools that we cannot see from a formula. So then principals, once they get their initial allocation information for staffing, they are then able to say, okay, this works for our school, this doesn't work for our school, this is the reason why we believe X, and they make that request. We review those requests before the principals before they actually start the staffing process, right? For if you're going to gain teachers or gain staff or whichever. So that allows us to then look at the historical perspective. It allows us to look at the equity conversations that we have. It allows us to look at programs that are available in schools. So once we do that, then we go to, now we're looking at the next phase of where staff is going to end up. And that's where, at this level around staffing, that's where the lobbying starts, right? Because nobody wants to lose staff. Everybody wants to gain staff, and everyone's situation is an exception. So it puts us in a position where ultimately we have to make the decision that we believe to be the best decision, the decision that's in the best interest of the school and all the information that we have at this time or at that time. The end of that becomes, so that's just around the staffing piece. Where I see the conversation for our presentation of the budget, everything that we're doing and recommending is connected to, one, the board approved goals and guardrails that are online. So the board has spent the last several months identifying these are the areas that we are focusing on for student focused outcomes. And these are the guardrails that we've gotten from the community that say to us, these are the things that we want you to make sure are at the forefront. These are the values that we have as a community, that as you're making decisions, we want you to make sure that you are focusing on. So everything that we've been doing through this process, through the conversations, through the appeals with the schools, to talking to the schools and their conversations with LSDMCs, all of that has been based on those board-approved goals and those board-approved guardrails that came from feedback from the community. Yeah, correct. All of those areas, correct. And then when we get to the April presentation, that is us saying as a team, board, we've heard everything that you've shared with us for expectations. We've received the information for the board-approved goals and guardrails. We have a lens for what needs to happen in a school building. So we are presenting to you our best thinking around a balanced budget. That's where it starts. Then from there, the board will do engagement. The board will give us additional feedback. The board will say, yes, we agree with this. No, we don't. Our goal is that we have been responsive to the recommendations of the board all along. And so therefore, there won't be as much of that outside of the individual lobbying that happens because someone's program is not there anymore or someone's specific pet project is not there anymore. So we really believe, and we did have an opportunity last year to move through that process. And I applaud the work that was done with our team and the support that we received from the board, because we got to a board approved budget that we all felt good about. Now we're going through that process again this year, but we also have historically the information that's been provided to me from the time I walked in on May the 2nd, and now the board approved goals and guardrails. So if that's helpful to kind of bring all of that together, then over that 2-month period, then at the end, the board makes the ultimate decision as to what happens in terms of the budget. You're welcome.
What I'd like to do after the treasurer speaks, then I'm going to go over here and we're going to hear from the folks that are here. State your case. Is there anybody else besides the one person that you mentioned, or is that okay?
Are you bringing them in?
No, I'm not bringing them in until the end, but these guys are going to go, and then so Jen, and then we have to keep moving as best we can, because I think we'll do that before we go to the contract review work that you guys are going to be sharing with us.
So I just wanted to add three comments to what Superintendent Wright said. One, you don't have to go back to that Saturday workshop stuff, because we're doing a financial town hall Tuesday night on the 28th. We're going to go through that same PowerPoint updated. Okay. So, and then you can provide questions, feedback, join in. We want it to be very conversational rather than at a typical board meeting, I stand up at the podium and do presentations. The second thing is, which I suspect because Fairview is a magnet school, once we do the projections and we get through the magnet application process, if we see the applications are much higher than the projections, we will make adjustments. We monitor what's happening while we're doing the budget cycle. Then in September, when we go start school, after Labor Day, we start looking at where the students actually showed up and what the numbers look like, because sometimes the 4th grade class might not look like what we projected because the 3rd graders promoted faster because of summer school, right, or something like that. And so we will right size in September as well. So there's several opportunities to make adjustments. So I just wanted to add that to the process.
I think I also want to add to that, because I anticipate the next question from there, because the next question from there becomes a question of staffing. So I think that we really want to make sure that as much as possible, we have taken in as many nuances as we can before we get to that process, because then the question becomes, well, the staff has already moved. Does the staff didn't come back? And so we continue to look through that. I came in late, a little bit late. So I didn't know what school our visitors were from, but I think that that's one of the areas as well. So we'll continue to look at that. So if there is an update that needs to be made, we'll make it, but it's not just a given that there will be an update.
Before we go over, I just want to, this is one thing I feel pretty strongly about, because you hear rumblings certainly in the district or in the community and school by school. I think there's a concerted effort by some people to make people believe that this is it. And the reality is, we'd like maybe it to be it, but the reality is things are changing. And how do you stay on course, but also be able to do what you need to do to keep everybody where they need to be? So it's still a very fluid situation in many ways, but that's not necessarily what you kind of hear, because people want to say this is the decision, because people want to keep leading, keep working, keep moving ahead or whatever, and do what they can. So we're not early in the stage. This is not early, but it is also not late. So it's in that kind of fluid place. But we're going to go to, is everybody here from the wonderful place where one of ours goes? Thank you. Great school. Have a wonderful sixth grader there. Yeah,
That's right. We're trying to keep it that way.
Do it that way.
Board member Bolton.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so I am LSDMC chair, actually, and I have to run to a work meeting, but I'll be very brief. I want to kind of hear, or better would be even point me to the board policy, or maybe someone could join us at our next LSDMC meeting from the administration to talk about Title I and how that process is put into place, because I don't have to tell this group the history lesson of Fairview, which is that once the lottery took place versus the first come first serve enrollment, I think one of the goals for greater equity and access was achieved. And so from the ODE's website, right, from the 2017-18 school year, we went from 27% of our student body being identified as economically disadvantaged to a pretty steady increase, 31, 33, 45, and then, or 41, and then 45 last school year. I don't have the number for this school year, but my guess is that it's higher than 45. And so we've gotten some conflicting reports about, is it a 4-year average? Is it you're over 40% for 5 years in a row? Like, when does that get triggered? We would love to know. Our principal and I are very closely aligned on this question. And I know, she went through appeals process in terms of our staffing budget numbers. I really, really have a particular interest in the reading specialists being retained. I think, again, I don't have to tell anybody in this room that our reading proficiency scores at the 3rd grade level are not cutting it district-wide. Fairview has typically been a pretty bright spot in that regard, but even now, our 5th grade ELA teachers sending out appeals for mass tutors for 5th graders who aren't reading at proficient levels. It's a huge issue. And so since we're not a Title I school, identified as a Title I school, even though we meet the definition of a Title I school, we're at this really difficult rock and hard place situation where a reading specialist has been budgeted to be removed, even though we clearly have the number of students who are in need of that service. So the other thing I would just point out is that I know the superintendent has already responded, which is helpful, to my letter about specifically the super sub position, and I would really implore the district to consider retaining those based on, just what we've seen in the last few years in terms of teachers' absences and how important, I will say, testimony for our school, that super sub position has been in maintaining some consistency for the students. And just, we all know we need to retain the best teachers possible. This is a global issue following the pandemic, particularly. And that is what I see as a very key piece of retaining our super qualified, wonderful teachers, is having super subs in the building. It just takes the stress. It takes a lot of stress off of our teachers. So those two, to me, and I'll let my more than capable colleagues here continue our comments, but thank you. That's all.
Thank you. I would say one of the interesting things in the last few weeks has been the Title I discussion in the district that I frankly have not heard at this length or in this depth. So this is one of those opportune times, very frankly, where there is something transformative happening. That this is a kind of a new oar in the stream on that. So Fairview, if you'll keep going, and that would be great. Oh yeah, we should hear. We even have a formal thing.
We got a formal perspective. And then I just want to add too, that I bent Jen's ear this morning. Some of our reading specialists, and I think it's worth saying, some of our reading specialists were covered with ESSER funds. And I'm advocating for reading specialists, but with the realization that we don't have that funding for them moving forward. Is that right?
So
For the non-title
primary
schools.
reading specialist was new this year as a result of learning loss from COVID. And
Okay.
that was funded by ESSER because ESSER was supposed to be about addressing learning loss. And so we all know ESSER has a huge cliff at the end, and that was not intended as a permanent solution.
So now and having said that, when is our ESSER cliff projected to happen?
So you have to finish encumbering the funds by September 30. So ESSER 1 and 2 are done.
Right.
ESSER 3, the deadline is June 30 of 24, has to be encumbered and paid out by September 30 of 24. Yeah.
There are
So
many demands. on
There
it.
are
Yes.
many demands, but just to ask a question in a lay term. So for this upcoming year, though, we still have ESSER funds available that could be potentially be
Yes, there is
utilized in that
some.
manner.
It's not, the third year was the smallest year of funding. And so we're working through that budget process at the same time we're doing this.
Did we use all of our ESSER monies from last year?
There was a small carryover from last year, from fiscal year 22 into 23. In December, we gave the board an update on how the fiscal year 23 budget is. So there was 84 million projected. I'm going off of months ago.
Sure.
84 million, 11 or 12 million of it's already been targeted towards building projects.
Mhm.
Okay. And then Monday night, you're going to see that one of the building projects bids came in $2 million higher than anticipated. So,
Sure.
okay. So that's 2 million more coming out.
Well, when we wait this long, it does happen.
Right. So there was 100, I think this year's ESSER budget was 110 million. And so we were predicting for fiscal year 24 down to 70 million because the building projects were a multi-year project, multi-year budget. So that's $70 million. Something's got to come out,
Sure,
right?
sure.
I am going to move on if we have more Fairview folks to participate. Thank you.
Yes, my name is Abria Drummons, and I'm a Fairview parent. I'm on the board, parent board in LCMC, and my thoughts echo Leslie's regarding budget cuts for Fairview staff next year. We're set to lose, I guess, a reading specialist, a K through 3, and a 4 through 6 in our super sub. But you guys are aligning that with those goals and guardrails. But the goal number 1 was to ensure that the kids, I'm gonna read it for you just in case we were unfit, that the percent of third graders proficient in reading in Ohio State will increase from 45% in June 23 to 61% in June 2027. But we're gonna cut a K through 3 teacher. Goal number 2 was stated that the current gap in reading proficiency between 6th grade African American, Hispanic, and multiracial students, which we have at Fairview, and 6th grade white students on the Ohio test will shrink from 37% in June 2023 to 17% by June 2027. But we're going to lose the 4 through 6 teacher, including a reading specialist. And so I'm not sure that any of the budget cuts that will be taking place are in line with the goals and guardrails that you guys are putting forth in your plan, your board, the goals and guardrails that you're taking into consideration here. I think it's a heavy injustice to Fairview's community, as we have been stating at least I've been stating all year, that that the way our intake process is that we cannot replace students as they leave. This has been an issue that has gone forth that I've brought up numerous times that has not been addressed.
Nuance, right?
It has not been addressed. And so there's no way for us to gain students when we lose them. So if we lose students, you can't say, let's project to next year to see how many students we're going to have if we're projected to lose students every year. So every year we're going to lose a teacher, lose a teacher, lose a teacher until we're to the point where this magnet school program is no longer effective. Okay, so what are we going to do? We're going to disperse Fairview and then send our kids back into community schools that are failing us still. I think we have, most of the parents now are in lottery positions.
we got in the lottery to get these our kids in these seats, and now we're being undercut with the privileges or the value that was in this program.
Thank you.
No
Very
problem.
good.
Well, as I said before, I'm Lauren Campbell Kong. I'm the head of the Equity, Inclusion, and Anti-Racism Committee at Fairview, which is a subcommittee of the LSDMC and was mandated by the Cincinnati Public School District. So I find it slightly ironic that I'm here because ultimately this is an equity issue here at Fairview. And the fact that I have to go back to the board that mandated such a committee to ask for such equitable thought processes to go into decision making, I'm having some serious cognitive dissonance with it, right? That being aside, and that being said, you know, Fairview post-lottery, I am a post-lottery parent. Fairview has been struggling since the lottery opened. Those teachers and the staff were not necessarily given resources to mandate and to help with those changes, and they're doing the best that they can, but they are stretched very thin. And going back to some of the ways in which decision making is made here at the board level, you know, I see 5-year projections being made from financial perspectives. I see that preschool enrollment is at the highest that it's ever been in 2 years. I've sat at LSDMC meetings where our community partners have stated that we have more preschoolers signed up to come to Fairview from the Rising Stars Academy on Vine Street than they've ever had before. So the influx of children who will be coming into this school is only going to increase at a kindergarten level. And then that's going to follow the school through the next 6 years. So again, there's a cognitive dissonance to say we're going to look at a 1-year projection to make a staff decision when I'm hearing 5 years decision markers for everything else. And that just to me seems a bit odd. Again, I'm new at the table. So I'm just trying to better understand how the decision making, especially with evidence-based data, is made. Ultimately, if the projected incoming children are more diverse, which was the entire reason this school was open to a lottery, and we don't support the teacher, staff, or parents to provide help through that transition, I would argue as a parent in this school system, y'all have failed me and my child and my husband, because he's also a part of that, right? And so I'm interested in like historical information. I'm interested in again, the defined understanding of how these decisions are made moving forward with a 5-year, 1-year, 7-year projection, like whatever their projection is. But the nuances of Fairview are that the lottery has upended them. To take staff away from them at this point, I can't even imagine what would happen there because they are so stretched so thin now. The principal is talking about having German teachers now do other homeroom things. I mean, I know our principal is looking at trying to address some of these things. But again, like it comes down to equity and the irony of being an equity committee head that was designated and required by the district it's slightly disturbing. But again, the nuances of Fairview. We cannot get students in post 3rd grade due to the language. It is a magnet school. People have to sign up. And I just hope a lot of that nuance, the nuances of the school go back into the decision making when it comes to budget.
Thank you.
Can I add
Crucial stuff real quick.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Can I add really quickly that the grade level that we're talking about that's driving the budget cuts at our school is that COVID, that really high impact COVID year.
Yep.
Okay. And that anomaly, I feel like in all of society and even when we're talking about budgets and all this other kind of stuff, we're COVID-19 and all these dollars and funding and everything stuff, but now we're ignoring those children now. And so at Fairview, these children are going to be left out because now we're just going to rip the veil of protection from COVID-19 away from them.
Thank you. I think that's important. Yes. Do you have something to add?
Yeah. And historically, if I'm remembering correctly, Fairview's like their enrollment's been pretty steady, and we usually retain kids from year to year. But with COVID, like a lot of other schools, we lost kids. We just haven't been able to replace those students in grades that were above 1st grade. But historically, we've kept most of our students, which is great. And then I just have a short statement to read. I'm a little nervous, so I'm just gonna read it.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and I'd like to thank everyone for being so welcoming. I appreciate that. Yeah. So as a parent with 3 children attending Cincinnati Public Schools, 2 of them attending Fairview, I urge you to consider maintaining at least one of the 4 proposed staff reductions at Fairview. As an individual who works in a public school district, I know district administrations and school boards are forced to make hard decisions in regards to staffing based on changing yearly budgets and funding. Based on Fairview's report card data from the 2021-2022 school year, about 30% of our students in grades 3 to 6 score below proficient on the English Language Arts state test. This is about looking at like what our enrollment is this year, so that is a little different. It seems like it's about 109 students. And then if you add the students in K to 2 that remained off track in early literacy, that's for the 21-22 school year, that was about 32 students. And this equals about 141 students who would benefit from the instructional consultation of a reading specialist. So like, and I know like staffing decisions are really tough decisions, and you only have so much funds in the budget, and it's difficult. But if we can maintain at least one position or even 2 of the positions, that'd be great. But I think the reading specialist, like from my perspective, is really important for our school.
Which we could possibly get if we
Don't negotiate against yourself now.
Oh, no.
Okay.
I'm not, but I'm just saying that title.
Yeah. And I don't know all the ins and outs of Title I. Like I know there's federal requirements and there's things
Well, I
with
think
the
we're all
district can have make
rediscovering
choices.
that
And, yeah.
Reassessing, but I think it's important that you're here, and I know that there's going to be more and more schools, and we're probably going to have to set more whatever, but the appeals have come through the administration, and then there's been reaction to that, but there's also this wider sphere of appeal, or as the superintendent mentions, the lobbying, and you've raised a couple of things that are unique to Fairview, and also unique to how the numbers have impacted. Certainly the COVID numbers impact everybody else, or some numbers get frozen. I know part of that Title I, there's a year that it's kind of frozen in place, and so that's kind of screwed people up a little bit too. But I would say this has been very helpful. Rob, we on it?
Yeah, so our speaker is also on this topic, so I didn't know
Great.
if you wanted to
Yes.
just get that.
Said at the end of them.
So Nick, go ahead and come on in. You can activate your camera and your microphone.
So, and thank you for the giving me the opportunity to speak briefly this morning. I appreciate all the efforts that all of you do. It's a large task to deal with the annual budgets and staffing. As a relatively recent relocator to Cincinnati, we had the good fortune of our kids to get in the lottery to Fairview, and I've been very pleased with the school. But obviously still concerned with these proposed budget cuts. I would, advocate that there'd be no staff reductions at the school. The one thing I did want to ask is, there's this discussion about appeals and appeal process. Obviously, as a new person relatively here, I'm not aware whether that's a public process, if those documents or appeals or the rendering of those decisions are available to the public and the taxpayers, but be curious about that as well. Appreciate your time and your efforts. Thank you.
The formal appeal process is something that's internal. It's within the administration. It's within the decision making. So then we use the appeal process. Out here, it's called lobbying. But inside, and you know what? They are equally important and influential in their own way. And this is public money, public stuff.
It's public money.
We love our district, and we appreciate the pressure and the insight. Even though just 3 things mentioned within the panel over there that are unique and need to be considered. So this has been helpful. And if the superintendent is, we keep working through this process, we keep working through the process.
I think the other thing that's also, and thank you everyone, and we don't generally respond to the public comments, but I do want to just give closure since we've been talking about this for a period of time this morning, just as we talk about the overall processes. We're coming up on a time that the lottery process, the applications are open. And that the applications are available. And so this would be a wonderful time for the school to continue marketing what they have at the school. marketing the opportunities for the students and for the families, because that also gives us more information about where we might see ourselves come August, right? So that I think that would be the best way for me to respond to that part of it. As I shared in my response to the email that was sent earlier, we will go back and have some conversation with the school just to make sure that what we have in terms of information is the way that the information is. But I do think that it's important to put that out there, that the opportunity is open. This is the time for each one, reach one, kind of put it out there what's available, and have families that are interested in Fairview as an opportunity for them to apply. The second piece that I do want to add here is I would agree with Board Member Bolton. Having been an educator for April will be 30 years, this is the first time that I have heard of schools that begin to, I'm not going to use lobby this time, but that really want more information about Title I status. And I think and if you think about the meeting that we had just yesterday, we talked about this very same thing, where there at one point having a school that was Title I status was very much a stigma for some, and it's not carrying that same type of stigma. One of the reasons is because of the additional resources that go along with schools that are Title I. So we did a presentation for principals last Thursday. I think that it would be important for us to just also schedule an additional, I don't know what the complete agenda is for the budget meeting next week, but I do think that it would be important for us to do that same presentation for the community around how Title I is determined, because it is not just the district says, yep, you hit this number and this is what it is, and now the school is designated Title I, and now you get all of these resources. Board Member Bolton referenced the gap in terms of the period of time, the year in between. It depends on where you are in the stages, and the numbers sometimes that individuals present in terms of the percentages of students that qualify for free and reduced lunch and what's actual based on the federal government aren't necessarily the same. So it's really important, I think, that we share that so that there is clarity, and also an opportunity for schools to make sure that if there are students that are receiving those services in their schools, that they also complete the applications, but recognizing that it's not an if-then. It's not a matter of we completed them all this year, or we've done this for the last 2 years, and now next year we're going to be Title I and we get all of this increase in money. So I think that's something that we can work on as well, because this is the first time, and I think it's fascinating, but it's great because it is changing the conversation about what it really means to need additional support for your students in your schools.
I would also add to that it's a new question, or it's a new approach, or whatever, and it's very important. But I would also say that it begins to be part of the whole fruition of the culture that the district has tried to help create, of diversity and equity and what have you. So I think it's the way it goes. So appreciate that. We have 2 more items, unless somebody has 2 more items on the agenda that have to at least be introduced. And I don't know I'd like to have the contract presentation, if you can update us. I know it's not complete, but if you can do the part that is complete, that would be great. And then we'll intro the last 2 items regarding properties and transportation, because those will be topics major next month.
Okay, so Rob, can you bring my PowerPoint back up? So at the last Finance Committee meeting is when we went over the under $200,000 contracts, under $200,000 contracts, with the recommendation that we determined eliminating 111 of them. And Board Member Moffitt wanted to know the supplier diversity categories of those and the reasons why they were done. And so we've done that work. And shortly, they'll be shown up on some charts. It's okay.
There we go.
Okay, so this
Pie
is,
charts.
these are the first, yes, lots of pictures. The first, and I can't read that far, so I'm going off my paper. But the chart to the left shows you just by number of the contracts, of the number of the 111, 38% of those were locally owned, 13% were women owned, 34 were small business, and 15% were minority. Then on the chart on the right is by dollar instead of number, because you can have like two contracts that are large dollars and it can shift it. You can see that the shift, it's fairly similar. It's almost exactly the same in terms of the breakdown. And those 111, just to remind you, was $2.6 million across all funds. I don't have paper copies because of being the network down. I mean, I was actually finishing this PowerPoint while I was on the phone with Dr. Moffitt on my way down to policy committee. So the next slide shows you the elimination reason. I'm sorry. The next slide shows you because I'm just a data geek. So I'm showing you the number of contracts that are neither minority or women owned versus versus minority and women owned. And so that's the dollars, the numbers on the left and the dollars on the right. And so what it says is that 61% of the contracts that were eliminated were neither women or minority owned versus the 39% that were qualified as minority or women owned. I just thought that was an interesting statistic.
Say that again.
Okay, I was going to say that again.
So of the 111 contracts, 61% of them did not qualify as minority or women owned. Only 39% fell in those two categories. You didn't ask me to do this. That was just interesting additional
go for
information. And then when you look at it by dollars, it's
stuff.
basically 60-40. Okay. So then the next slide shows the elimination reasons. And we had 5 different categories. So either the contract did not meet the K performance indicator that was established. We decided to bring something in-house, or we're anticipating bringing that outsourced vendor and hiring an employee. It was a shift in strategy. So we decided to go in a different direction on how to solve that issue, or that it was like a one-time project that it was no longer needed. And so on the the elimination by count, 69% were because the work was no longer needed. So it was like a one-time purchase or a one-time project, and those things are over. The ones that didn't meet the key performance indicator it's all overlap, but it's about 3%.
Yeah, that quasi phrase, shift in strategy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's kind of cool. I mean, that it's not same old.
Right.
We're doing something different, or we found out we didn't need to do something. I mean, that's that keyword. It's not transportation, it's transformation.
Right. And so the superintendent was 98% of this work. And so we just did the numbers and the data. But I mean, I sit there and listen to her say, well, in my previous experience, I know of a better way to do this, or we have one department that's doing this and another department's doing this, we're using the same vendor, we should consolidate and do it, whatever. So this is a really valuable experience, as painful as it was, 884 contracts, and we're still not done. It was very valuable, and the education to district employees about what real performance is on a vendor contract was huge. Because when I first started having these conversations, some of the answers I would get back was, well, the school really likes this vendor. I'm like, okay, but did it increase attendance or decrease? Right. Did it really do what we're paying it to do? Great people, but is it driving outcomes, right? And so that's been an education that's sweeping the nation, honestly. It was a big conversation at the Council of Grade Schools last week. So on the right side is the same data, but it's done by dollar instead of number of contracts. And so it's similar, not shifts a little bit. It's a little bit different shift than comparatively speaking. The yellow shift in strategy was a larger percent, going from number 22% to 33%. Fascinating, because I'm just a data geek. So there was a series of contracts that were still under review. That work has been done. I just haven't had a chance to look and analyze it because I couldn't get to any of the files yesterday. So we'll bring them back at the Finance Committee next month.
Great.
Questions?
Comments? We good? All right.
I'll reserve my comments. Again, when I see stuff firsthand, I
Okay.
will reserve my comments. I have some, but I'll reserve them.
Well, I appreciate you asking for this information.
Thank you.
Oh, and then just one last thing about the in-source versus outsource. Cody's been working really hard on establishing kind of a task force where where he collected all the legal requirements and is trying to come up with a decision matrix so that when somebody comes and said, hey, one example that we were considering is the transportation call center, vendor driven right now. Consider, well, do we want to bring that in-house and our
Yes.
employees? So what decision points do we have to consider in order to make that decision? And then so we created a task force that Mr. Hoying and Mr. Barkhart, our Chief Operations Officer, and Jeremy Gollihue, our CIO, are going to, because those are the areas that we're considering right now to kind of play with it and get it right before we expand it across the district. And so we're getting ready to kick that off next week, right? So making progress.
That's great. Any comments, members?
Not at the moment.
If you look at our last two topics, I would like to propose that in addition to some of the stuff we want to revisit, as you've mentioned, I would like to be able to talk from a budget or financial standpoint about the last two items, and one is everything that we use transportation for. It's not just the yellow and the metro. It's any aspect of our transportation system, whether it's, ambulance or whether it's vans or whatever, however we're doing it. And for what? The field trips, athletic events, to and from school, what have you. And if we can even just have that kind of list, I don't know that we have the financial breakdown for all of those items. We used to kind of do that where you could say we're going to be transporting these special needs kids, or we've got the kids with housing insecurity or whatever. If we could have an itemized list of really what the true spectrum, the true span of what transportation is really about, I think that would be helpful to us. As I know how you're trying to nibble away as well as chomp away on getting everything solved. But it seems like that would be something for us to see, because I remember doing that several years ago and it was pretty enlightening. And the other piece is something that's kind of coming out of ad hoc a little bit, I think, which is this issue of properties and use of facilities, whether it's new property, developing property, consolidation of property. I just think that needs to at least be in the public kind of purview, that also is a big part of whatever we do financially, or in growth, or in maximizing capacity. So if we can just kind of have that be there, I think that'd be helpful. Yes.
I'm kind of confused on what
I'll give you an
what you mean by that.
example. What we talked about in your committee, critical mass you need to be able to deliver a real program. Meaning
Okay.
if you have too few kids, or indeed the better use of the facilities that we have, whether it's how we divide some schools up, or we combine some schools, or is there, we do still need high school seats, and we still desperately need some preschool seats. That the two ends of the spectrum, we, in the middle, the overcrowdedness or the imbalance is something.
Okay.
But at the preschool, we need more seats. At the high schools, we need more seats. So, I mean, I think we'd like to introduce, for discussion purposes, some data and some information about those prioritized properties and facilities, as well as have a better understanding of the complexity and the uniqueness and range of transportation. I think that would help the committee and everybody and the public kind of get familiar too. Yes, ma'am.
So I want to make sure that I'm clear on number 7 so that we bring back to the committee what the committee is requesting. So for targeting and prioritizing of the for the property and inventory. So I think I'm hearing 2 things.
Okay.
One is where we see opportunities for growth in terms of in-school buildings with our current inventory of schools.
Yes.
2, where we see needs,
Mhm.
i.e. we know that we need a high school in this space because of the number of students that we have in all of the other schools. So I would say maybe needs, I'd say opportunity. Well, needs, because we need it because we're already overcrowded in most of those spaces. And then 3 could possibly be opportunities for growth because of specialized areas. For example, pre-K to 2. I continue to, and I met with the ELL council, but our ESOL population, where we're having just monumental growth in those areas, but opportunities for us to think differently or maybe do something differently around the need for properties in those particular areas. And I think the 4th might be if there is specific program need for a particular property area as well. Yes, okay, understood.
I just think that would be really a good angle to approach the money issue, the enrollment issue, all these things that are critical to the decisions we have to make. And I think those 4 things are good. I wouldn't have had the 4, but I like the 4. Do you have other suggestions?
I think that rolls over into ad hoc action items as well. So I think it has a dual purpose.
So do the same, so instead of what we talked about for ad hoc, do this one instead?
I think it's this, I think they're similar.
Okay.
You know, when you talk about the need, we ended yesterday with the need for exploring middle schools. You can't explore middle schools without looking at properties, without looking at where would we put it, you know, like a feasibility study. Where would we put the middle school if we talked about that? So I think what you're saying when you talk about high schools, looking at building usage, it's all, to me, it's all tied together. I wouldn't imagine that it's different. And then
This might have a
transportation.
financial spin a little bit more than ad hoc, but it's
Right.
the same kind of
I think it's the
material.
same
You're right.
data. I think financially, when we talk about transportation, I'm thinking knowing you and how you're advocating for our fleet, I took your transportation question to mean what areas are we providing transportation outside of the norm metro yellow, and like field trips. What's that cost? What's that? So if that's the case,
Everything we're doing.
yeah, I took that to mean like that could also tie into transportation when we talk about those schools that are transporting beyond the multiple mile.
Okay.
You know, I just see it all tying together, if that makes sense.
Okay, so I thought I was clear on the 6 for the itemized list of transportation. So I took that just at face value for what it was. So just in what we're thinking about transportation, everything that we're doing for transportation that's not just taking students back and forth to school.
I think that's what you mean.
That's what you're talking about, right? Okay.
Because I'm thinking of her bend is always a fleet. And if it's a fleet, that's not to school, from school, that's other. So that's what I was thinking that you meant. Because you always talk about a fleet in terms of field trips and things like that.
Yeah,
So,
and health checks, you
Yeah.
know, and getting kids to and from the school-based health center. What are our needs regarding transportation? We know we got to try to get the kids to and from school.
Mhm.
And there might be something that part of that is interesting too, because I guess one of the interesting things that came out of one of the round tables was the fact that when some of our kids change their address along the line, and so we change that to accommodate that kid, then all these other people who haven't moved are adjusted. So this whole idea of our kids being so mobile, no pun intended, but being so mobile, if we could find a way to take care of those specific needs versus every time somebody moves or changes, everybody else has to too, because that's what we hear or whatever. So yeah, I mean, I just think those would be two good topics to kind of throw into the money pot, and also to talk about some of the visioning, if that works for administration. Jen, for next month, your interest is, are you coming back with the rest of the contract work? Is there anything else? Yes.
Right.
Uh-huh.
I guess we'll update on where we stand with the budget, so.
Okay. Great, thank you. Well, I appreciate everybody being so patient of hearing from our public. So we'll work out a way to make it a little bit more, you know, we've had 2 schools show up particularly.
But we've had
Yeah,
about
like
4
across the
emails.
street. Yeah, but we've had
We have
lots of emails.
So I think, honestly, I wrote down, I think we need to be talking about title funding publicly, as you shared. I even thought, Jen, you know, add this to a Just Ask Jen, or add this to some sort of community engagement, even if it's just online. The questions around title funding are fair, and the applicability to schools. Understanding that, I think, is significant, and I think we need to really, even if it's just a snippet where we explain it and we can push that out to people. It doesn't have to be a formalized engagement session. I also think the lottery process as a a snippet conversation where it's like 15 minutes or less and we push that out. I think that is justified because people are asking for those questions. We're talking about it because we understand it, and in ad hoc we're talking about magnet neighborhoods, and people are getting a little confused, and I think we need to just have some clarification moments. Public records to the community, they asked about the appeal process, and you mentioned that that's internal, and I think that that's very fair, but I also think we need to explain to them what is public, because many people are bringing their school's budgets to us and saying, hey, this is my school budget, I got a copy of it. So those things are public record, and what's public and what's not. And I think because they can get some things public, they may think that all of it is public, and we just need to make sure that we explain what is public and what is not public. I'm all for giving the information to people that in its as it's final. So if the budget is not final and the process appeal process is still there, it's not public yet. But once we get the public information, let's be able to pass that out, because the information is there, it's coming to us. And so
it's coming in, but you know, the administration has to be able at the school level and district level to conduct the business of the district.
Sure.
But it's also important that as best as we can do so with as much information being shared as possible.
I just think that
and not getting ahead of ourselves on stuff, because again, if you have people saying that's it, well, then that's when they get nervous and they get freaking out with the board members. And is it final? Is it not final? So I think that's the confusion. How far along are we in all of this process?
Yeah,
you probably have different answers from different people based upon the role that they play.
But if we came out with that timeline and we put that, I don't know if we need to put it on the website, but I think almost we do, because people are hearing conflicting information, and then they reach out to board members like, this is what I'm getting. And if they understood that this is a part of the process that we're in, rather than this is the finite end of the process.
And I think the list that was shared today at least will start to go a little bit farther along that way as to where we are.
I think so.
I think one of the questions that I have is because LSDMC is a part of the process, like the budgets go to the LSDMC, they're presented to the LSDMC, and there's input about positions from the LSDMC. Is that not considered where that public part of the public part of the process at the school-based level would be?
To answer your question, I think that's who we're being contacted by, are LSDMC chairs and people that, because the LSDMCs are inclusive of parent leaders and community leaders and teachers. So we're getting members of the LSDMC who see that budget, and part of our policy process is that they do approve that budget. So they're looking at it or don't. And so they're asking very pertinent questions, very important questions, as they should, in being somewhat fiscally responsible for those budgets. So it's not out of step. Like, we're not getting people off the street to just say, hey, I got this budget. We're getting people who actually have an investment in that decision-making or approval of that budget, ask legitimate questions of us through the process. That some of them have been normalized questions that they would ask anyway. If they got a budget, they're just very involved. Many of them are the stark differences are significant, that they feel the impact to their community is going to be great. And so they're asking questions as in a way they should, because they have that fiduciary responsibility. So.
And I think the last thing that I would add to that, and this is something that we also had to make sure that we reviewed with principals. In the presentation that we did, that I think that the treasurer referenced that she's going to do again at the meeting next week, we talked about there is the belief that there has been major change. And the reality is we went through each of the areas to talk about where the changes were. So there haven't been major changes. And I think somewhere along the lines, there is the belief that there have been major changes. And I think if we continue to point folks back to leadership, so that they're able to share some of those things as well. And we can continue to clarify as there are questions that are being asked. So we'll continue to do that on our part. But we, some of the recommendations that we've made around ESSER, for example, has really been an attempt to be, one, prepared for the fact that we don't have ESSER after next year. And number two, to look at, as we come back to the budget portion, to look at some of the additional opportunities that we have with ESSER that we don't get with anything else, that will have lasting impact and influence on the overall organization and how we're providing services to our students. So that's, I think, a little bit different. That probably is a bit of a difference and a bit of a nuance, other than some of the things that we've thought about it before. So that might be helpful.
I think that's true. And I think also the LSDMC and the principal and all of that sort of thing, it's a very internal process. And there's not necessarily the great belief that the LSDMC can say no as much as they want to or would if given the opportunity. And there's certainly, I can think all the way back to Mrs. Ronan's days that no principals didn't want to look like the kid couldn't control their LSDMCs. So there's all kinds of conflicting kinds of things. Again, I just want to emphasize that this is still a fluid process.
Yes, and so there's things that change and memories that are short. Because if you recall, I think every finance committee, every board meeting that I publicly presented, we talk about the cliff. So the super subs are part of the cliff.
Mm-hmm.
There's other cliff things that are going to start, we're going to have to make some tough decisions about, like the level of nursing services that we have. We can't sustain $8 million a year. We just can't. So we can if we make other choices in the general fund. And so that's what I was referring to when I said it's all a matter of priorities. But once they get that resource in their building and it goes away, when the funding dries up, nobody ever wants to go, get people to go away, right? So you remember what happened with the resource coordinators, right? That started off as a 21st century grant. And then now suddenly it was in student wellness this year. That $5 million lift is going to hit the general fund this year.
And I would also say I'm going to make this number up, there's 10 darn things that the board is going to insist on. I mean, I don't know what they are.
I would like to know what they are.
Exactly.
Me too.
It'd be so helpful.
Yeah.
I'm sure it would be. I'm sure it would be.
I'm totally there with you. When this money, you guys inform us very, very well, but we don't necessarily have talk about actual choices to be made. And that's our fault for not organizing our meetings in such a way. You guys are giving us the information, and this is a fluid enough decision. But there are things that are part of the Cincinnati landscape that are probably untouchable. I mean, we could probably go have lunch and list them, but I don't want to do that right now. But
And then there still could be other things that come up,
sure.
because in all fairness, some things, until we see that it's missing on a page, it's like, oh, you didn't think about that? No, this absolutely has to be there. But to your, I want to make sure that I address what you're saying. My issue, I'm looking at this as a board member, the type of board member that I wanted when I was just a parent. People's memories tend to be short, but that's where you need to do as much engagement and reminding before you start cutting. And so if this was something that, and we talk about ESSER, we prepared them on the knowledge, but I don't know if we really prepared them that looking forward in this year, 2023, 2024, we're going to be cutting this. And so I think that's where you get paranoia, is when people have limited information about what impacts them within the next 6 to 9 months. And we're really talking about education. So with the example that you brought up about nurses having to be cut because it's going to hit the budget, we need to start talking about that now, not with the next budget cycle next year. This needs to be talked about right now, so that we tell people almost monthly, but specifically quarterly, hey, looking at the 2023, 2024 budget, we're going to have to cut nurses. So it's not a shock that in the next 3 months, nurses are going to be cut. It's an actual prepared conversation. And I don't think that we do enough of that. And I think that's part of why you get people that hear, oh, this is what it is in a finite manner, and now they're nervous. But had we been talking about this 3 months ago, or even last year, that consistently, I think people would have been a little bit more prepared. So that's my last take on that. I think we're doing better about engaging, but when we know that things are going to end, like nurses, we need to start preparing people now that it's going to look different for nurses next year. And I think they hear that. I think the community, I believe the community will give us grace if they have all of the information, and all of the information timely, not in the moment, like this is it. And I think that's what people have been hearing, is that this is it, and they're confused.
I would only add to what you just said, though, is that the administration's been telling us about the nurse problem.
Yeah.
The nurse issue.
For 4 years.
So
this is true.
So it's there. And so we said, okay, well, where there's redundancy, if you have a school-based health center, then do you also need to have a nurse in that school building or whatever? So yes, we have to be talking about all of this.
We do.
And I think certainly this has been, I would say, a lot more open, a lot more comprehensive than in some years past. But again, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, I can remember standing at the podium and having 2 people in the audience after spending 20 hours preparing for a public presentation to get that public engagement. So this is thrilling that people are so involved in
That's the way to look at
and in
it.
8 years as a treasurer, I've never had anybody ask me about Title I. Never.
Isn't that
Until
great?
this year.
That's good.
Yeah. And
it all started with one question out there. And that one question, the one question was, does the money follow the kids? That was the first question out there.
That's true.
And it's who knows? And then also about, the lunch and breakfast program, and what does that, I mean, this is what's cool, is that big stuff is being asked.
So I've come to the conclusion that I'm going to create a web page off of the district website, the financial information, as we're kicking off a budget cycle, all this information, and just keep it updated as we go, so that the public is here, because we use the schools to communicate to their school communities, right? I present to the district-wide LSDMC every fall and talk about this process. But the town halls are new.
Different this year than it's been.
What's that?
I think this process is a lot
The
different.
last
than it's
4
been.
years, the process has been different than every
Every
other
year.
Every year has been different
It gets more open.
Yes, agreed. But the conditions of the development and the challenges for the budget development have changed over the last 4 years.
Absolutely.
And so there is no norm anymore. But
hallelujah.
it never occurred to me to actually create a web
Good
page
idea.
that's just about the build it budget process. So, yeah.
Well, if it's okay with everybody, and we're not going to vote on it unless everybody insists on it, if we haven't already adjourned, I adjourn now.
Thank you for coming.